I have one single intention for us today, and that is for us to understand more deeply the dynamic and healing force of raw food. So go on this journey with me. It starts in 2011, and at that stage, I was going through life like a robot. I was just going through a series of roles. My heart was dead to everything around me, and my mind was running out of creative ways to make people around me believe that I was a happy and engaged person. Have you ever been in that situation where you are just simply burning out from the sheer pretense of living a life not real, not yours? You feel severely depressed because you lack direction, you have no goals, you don't know how to find your passion, and you feel completely and utterly untethered. I felt all those things, and I badly wanted to not feel them. I wanted to numb my mind, and the way I did that was through food. Every day, I would go into my kitchen from the moment I awoke to the moment my fatigued body could no longer stand, and I cooked. I sought refuge in morning markets where the cacophony of sounds around me deafened my chaotic mind into silence, and the colors and shapes of vegetables jumped out and sat like a salve over my bleeding heart. The weight of the bags I carried home displaced the weight I felt sitting in my chest like wet cement. I cooked. I thought I was cooking to numb my mind, but as time wore on, it started to dawn on me that the very thing I was using to numb my mind was the very same thing that was healing me. The tears that fell from my eyes into the dough that I kneaded told me that I was starting to feel again. The rising plumes of yeast that yielded life caused my own heart to come to life. And when the bread was baking in the oven, I would watch it rising, and my own heart would rise in unison. Finally, when it was time to break that bread open, I felt parts of myself break open and fill with new light. But don't worry. If I ever do have a chance to cook for you one day, I will not be feeding you sad bread. Maybe some joyful chocolate or some ecstatic cheese. So as I stumbled along on this path, I delved deeper and deeper, and I found myself falling in love with food. My explorations became more fevered and fervent. These vegetables, they completely astounded me because the more of them I ate, the better I felt. And the better I felt, the more mobilized I became. And the more mobilized I became, the deeper my study into them. And that is how I discovered the healing and dynamic quality of raw food. I had no idea what I was doing. No idea of the future career path I was carving. All I knew was that I wanted to change my life. I wanted a life in which I felt connected, strong, happy, and healthy. And you know what? The point at which I discovered raw food was the point at which everything changed. And you know how I knew? Because of the way my body felt and functioned after I ate raw food. I felt energized. My mood stabilized. I had felt a clarity of thought, and I felt more positive about life. My path was set into motion. Raw food blew my mind open because it is whole, natural, unprocessed, unrefined, and uncooked food, not on stoves, not in microwaves, and not in ovens, but it is of the bounty of this beautiful earth. Like this dish, for example. This is simply a plate of raw vegetables and nuts, suspiciously disguised as raw gnocchi. We all know gnocchi, right? It's a beloved Italian dish made with flour, potatoes, and eggs, cooked until soft, and then combined usually with cheese, cream, or butter. And so in this raw version of gnocchi, we juice root vegetables. We extract the fiber-rich pulp, and we combine it with spices and herbs to create a raw gnocchi. And then we use a very common raw food technique, and that is air drying, which does two things. It preserves the shelf life of food, and it brings structure to food. but it must be done at a temperature of 45 degrees or lower, because this is the temperature at which food is still considered raw and at which most of the nutrients still remain intact. So after we air dry the gnocchi for 4 hours, we plate it in this visually dynamic way because we want to break the boundaries of what healthy food perceptions are. Every plate is a celebration of what we know raw food to be and how we know it makes us feel. And this celebratory aspect also allows our guests to give themselves permission to make the right food choices without feeling like they have to sacrifice pleasure. This is a plate of raw dumplings, and the color of the skin is green. So to create this kind of skin, we process raw coconuts and tomatoes with a variety of vegetable juices, and then we spread it on a tray and we dry it for 6 hours. After those 6 hours, we peel it off and we cut them into squares. We fill them with kimchi that we make on our own and other really delicious ingredients. And there you have a raw dumpling. So these are visually playful foods, but they are so much more than showgirls, just distracting you from the fact that they are so powerfully nutritious. First of all, you cannot achieve this dramatic quality of color with cooked food. This is a very high in phytonutrient kind of food. So firstly, phytonutrients are abundant in antioxidants, which fight free radicals that cause disease. Secondly, they contain kimchi. Fermented foods like kimchi, miso, and sauerkraut are some of the most healing foods you will find on the planet, precisely because they contain microbial life forms that do a lot of problem solving in our bodies. And third of all, they just explode with flavor in your mouth. The intensity of flavor and the complete sensorial experience of raw food is the thing that first surprises people when they try raw food. Because usually when people think about raw food, they imagine limp lettuce leaves and offensive salad dressings. But I just want to set the record straight today. This is raw food. It contains the most potent quality and quantity of minerals, vitamins, antioxidants, phytonutrients, bacteria, and yeasts, all intuitively designed by nature to enhance and improve our health. And how does it do that? Or how does that happen? Well, precisely because the cellulose structure of the vegetables have not been denatured by high heat. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying cooked foods are bad. Some foods need to be cooked for their nutrients to be released. What I am saying is, cooking foods that would rather be eaten raw, it's like taking a piece of steel and heating it to high heat, where it structurally remains intact, but it remains intact, but it structurally becomes weakened. So it cannot bear as much weight as it could have were it not heated. The same logic can be applied to the nutrients in our food. They may not be completely destroyed by the cooking process, but they are not as beneficial to us as they could have been were they raw. So these raw nutrients provide the metabolic system with enough resources to restore, repair, and rejuvenate a depleted digestive system, which in turn boosts our defense line against diseases. So I asked a few of my friends to share their experiences about eating raw food. Take a look.
One great benefit of raw food is after a while you will develop clearer thoughts. Clearer thoughts will lead to better judgment. So that's why it will help you for your everyday life, for your job, or even your studies.
Adding in more raw food was powerfully life-changing for me. It gave me more energy than I'd ever experienced, and that really is, for me, the greatest benefit of raw food. It helped me to find balance and homeostasis, physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
Ultimately, it was through raw foods that transformed my health, most notably my mood and my misdiagnosed status. Ultimately, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for the healing forces of these ingredients.
I've been keeping my breakfast and lunch with mostly raw food. It gives me the energy and clarity I need for work, especially after lunch. I don't feel the food coma anymore. I also try to put as much fermented food as possible into my diet. The enzymes and good bacteria that makes me get sick less, and even I get a cold, I was able to recover much faster with healthier and happier gut flora.
Raw food changed my way of eating, my lifestyle. It keeps my body more energized and my stomach happy with all the live enzymes.
So as my friends have alluded to, raw food increases the clarity of your mind, it increases your energy, and it helps to resolve health challenges from the mild to the serious. And how does this happen? So what you see in front of you is a tray of buckwheat, which has been sprouting over a period of 3 days. So when we sprout these little guys, we take really good care of them. We build them their own sprouting room, we turn the lights down, we make sure the temperature is just right, and over a period of 3 days, we water the buckwheat 3 times a day. So this is how you sprout. So what is so important about the sprouting process is that after those 3 days, they grow these beautiful, long, strong tails. Any food that is a sprout is really high in enzyme value. As with anything that requires growth, to grow, you need energy. So when you eat a sprout in its first phase of growth, you're consuming a lot of that enzyme energy. And in the body, enzymes are responsible for catalyzing the chemical processes of digestion. So the more enzymes you eat, the more efficient the process, the more vibrant and healthy you feel. So after we dry the sprouted buckwheat for 6 hours, we then combine them with a variety of fresh and dried fruit, nuts, seeds, and date paste as a sugar source. And then we put them back in the dehydrator, and this time we leave them in for up to 2 days. And after we take the finished product out, what we have is an enzyme-rich, highly nutritious, guaranteed clean food source. And it's also delicious. So this is not the only thing you can do with sprouting buckwheat. You can also ferment it. I'm a little bit fascinated by fermentation, and I'm hoping that by the time we're done today, you will feel encouraged to go home and try and ferment some of your own food. So in the process of fermentation, bacteria and yeast feed off the nutrients in organic matter and give rise to something called biopreservatives, which are a collection of acids, gases, or alcohols. And these biopreservatives perform many functions, and 2 of the most important are that they preserve food for a very long period of time, and they also enliven and enrich food with even more bacterial nutrition. So what you see in front of you is a jar of our well-muscled buckwheat sprouts, but this time, instead of being used to make granola, we're using them to ferment with drinking water. So over a period of 2 days, the liquid will, through a series of chemical processes where the microorganisms in the air are drawn into the jar and feed off the nutrients of the sprouted buckwheat, they will give rise to a probiotic-rich liquid called Rejuvelac. So Rejuvelac was created by Anne Wigmore, who was born in 1909 and was the founder of the Hippocrates Institute of Health, which is still going really well today. So Rejuvelac has a really long history of enriching and supporting digestive health in people. We use this liquid to ferment our dairy-free tree nut cheeses. We make cheeses out of nuts, and we combine the Rejuvelac to improve and increase the bacterial quality and quantity in the cheese. We leave it to ferment in a fermentation room for 24 hours, and after those 24 hours, we're left with a solid cheese matter that looks like that. After which we season, we age, we air dry, we age again, and we have something that looks like this. So this is a cheese that is fermented, that is filled with bacteria, and it's made from nuts. And it slices like a cheese, it has a mouthfeel like a soft cheese, and it's really satisfying on the belly. This is our red wine onion jam cheese. And in this one, we have a spectrum of flavors from sweet to acidic to umami from the dehydrated onions. And finally, this is our blue cheese. So to make a tree nut cheese that tastes like blue cheese took a lot of experimentation. But finally, we came up with something that we are really proud of. And this is made with a homemade Japanese miso, spirulina, and maple syrup. So you get that full complement of stinky, funky, acrid kind of blue cheese flavor that you're supposed to get from a dairy blue cheese. And the final celebration looks like this. It enthralls me to no end, to know that when I'm eating my cheese, I'm engaging with bacterial life forms that are as old as this planet. And I am actively engaging with food as a healing dynamic force. These microorganisms first existed on our planet as single-celled microorganisms whose DNA information just floated around inside the cell, not bound by a nucleus. They later diversified into nucleus-bound cells and finally complexified into us. They are essential to our existence. They live in our digestive systems, they live all around in the air around us, and they keep this planet functioning healthily. So Sandor Elix Katz, author of the book Wild Fermentation, and one of my biggest heroes, says this about fermentation. Fermentation is everywhere. It is an everyday miracle, the path of least resistance. Microscopic bacteria and fungi are in every breath we take and every bite we eat. They are the ubiquitous agents of transformation, constantly feasting on decaying matter, constantly shifting dynamic life forces from one miraculous and horrible creation to the next. Microorganisms are our allies and our ancestors. They keep the soil fertile, and they comprise an indispensable part of the life cycle. Without them, there could be no other life. So I remember one night I was alone in my kitchen. Everyone had gone home for the day. And I had with me a bag of organic beetroot just freshly pulled out of the earth that day by a dear friend. They were still caked in mud. And when I held them in my hand, they seemed to pulse with a steady, dark heartbeat of the earth. I knew I was holding life force in my hands. I was about to ferment them, and I felt myself entering into ritual space. Because even though I was alone in my kitchen, I knew I was surrounded by millions and millions of microscopic life forms, and that together we were going to enter into the primal dance of intuitive co-creation. Together, we were going to create a food that was rejuvenating, dynamic, and healing. A food that I could put into my body and bring greater complexity to my own ecosystem, enlivening and diversifying, allowing it to function at its greatest capacity. And in turn, within myself, reflect the Earth's own ecosystem. And all this just by adding salt to beets, removing air, and leaving it in a dark cupboard to incubate. Does this process sound familiar to you? Isn't this the way in which we incubate in our mother's wombs, in the sweet, dark softness of it all, with millions and millions of microbial life forms processing us into shape? We collect our microbial identities from lactobacillus, which is most richly found in the birth canal. Every painful contraction feeding us dynamic and mysterious information which identifies our existence on this very planet. And as adults, the more raw and fermented foods we eat, the richer our microbial identities. So what, I ask you, can be any more healing and dynamic than our relationship with raw and fermented foods? Thank you.